Hello and welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to highlighting the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, Linux personalities, YouTubers, everyday users. Each person plays an important role in our community. And the goal is to have a conversation with each one of these guys about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host Rocco, and with me is my good friend Adam. How are you, Adam?
Doing all right. How's it going?
Awesome. And just as a little side note, this past weekend, this is a guy that I talk to almost every day. And this past weekend, I got to meet him at Self, which was absolutely awesome. And although we didn't have as much time as I would have liked to just sit down and chat, it was so awesome to meet you, dude.
You too, man. It was awesome. We had a good time.
Yep. A good time was had by all.
Indeed.
All right, so just as another side note, some of these questions that I'm going to be talking to Adam and asking him about, you will have seen before and maybe see in future episodes as well. But I don't think the questions are important so much as the answers to those questions. So 95% of these questions in these discussions were brought up from the BDLL community. So these are the questions that people want to know the answers to from you specifically, Adam.
I'm an interesting guy. What can I say?
All right. So tell us, who is Adam Grubbs?
I'm what I would like to refer to myself as a turbo nerd. I'm always, into computers, into computing. When I was young, I got into computers pretty early. I dig video games. I dig a lot of things that are just very technical. I'm just a very technical person. Doesn't mean I'm not creative as well, but mostly technical.
Mostly technical, yes. I wouldn't consider you an everyday user.
Yeah.
All right. What do you do for a living, man?
I'm an infrastructure engineer for Atlanta Public Schools here in Atlanta, obviously. I work, the K-12. It's a kindergarten through 12th grade education institution. So I don't interact with the kids or the teachers or anything. I'm just behind the scenes, making sure all the IT stuff is going smoothly and that, day-to-day operations are great. I'm in charge of the architecture team, and we handle monitoring and logging and some security applications. And I just maintain the servers and the applications for those.
But let me ask you, it's got to be a huge headache when updates roll out or new things are put into the system.
It can be. We actually just recently started our summer projects, and it's been stressful. And the thing about working in K-12 education is most of the year, aside from the winter breaks and the summer breaks, you're pretty much just on maintenance mode. You just try to keep everything running, and if anything pops up, you'll deal with it. But most of the big projects that we do are in the summer and in the winter, and there are times where I'll go weeks with like nothing to do. Like really, I try the best to find something to keep myself busy because because we work down in the NOC in the data center, so there's no windows or anything. So just to keep yourself sane, you got to keep yourself busy. So
give me
there in case somebody at work watches this, so they don't think I'm doing nothing. So
doing nothing, yeah. Don't get yourself in trouble. I mean, not that like this is going to go out to 8 million people, but you never know. So what kind of percentage is there in that system as far as Linux versus Windows or Linux versus other types of servers and stuff?
So in my environment, we're all Linux.
Nice.
All of the things that I'm responsible for are Linux servers. I think there's maybe one or two Linux servers that I'm not responsible for, but pretty much all the Linux stuff that we have at Atlanta Public Schools is under my jurisdiction there.
Nice.
We have mostly Windows servers because education, but
Because
all the Linux stuff is handled by me.
Well, I've asked you this before, but give me a reason why the education system where you're working couldn't switch over or wouldn't be best to switch over to Linux.
So as far as like Linux servers go, it's a matter of finding the applications that run on Linux that the education sector needs. And a lot of times, because of the entrenched nature of education, Microsoft was very big in pushing for education during the 90s and early 2000s. And most, schools before then were Mac or Apple machines. And when they switched over to Windows, Microsoft, with NT and their other server products showed, hey, you can also, get the one-stop shop. You get your desktops, you get your servers, you get everything from us. So traditionally, Microsoft's been a big part of that. And a lot of times the applications that people use in the organization only run on Windows. And not just the desktop applications, but the web applications that they need to access are only served on Windows servers. So that's an unfortunate thing, but it's the case. As far as the desktops themselves go, we've mostly switched to Linux. We have a huge fleet of Chromebooks.
Right.
And that's primarily what the students use. We have a couple schools that Microsoft is kind of like pushing their weight around, and they all have Surfaces and they all use Bing, and it's just an absolute mess. But most users use Chromebooks, except for the teachers. All the students are using Chromebooks.
Well, you had mentioned to me before about when all the Chromebooks open up in the morning and the network goes crazy.
Yeah, so we have a 10 gigabit pipe. We have two of them, 10 gigabit pipes. Some schools go through one, some schools go through the other.
Right.
We can see a huge utilization of that 10 gig just in the early morning between like 7 and 9, where everybody's opening up their Chromebooks and logging in and everyone's getting started for the day. And then after lunch, you see the same thing happen when everyone's reopening everything and logging back in. Yeah, it has a big impact on our network, and we're actually taking some mitigations and such using things like Pi-hole, for example, to block adverts and things like that, to lower, not just for safety and security, but to lower network traffic.
Right.
Those are just, and we have some traffic shaping on our firewall and a lot of other things that we've been doing to try to mitigate the effect on everything else, because at the end of the day, we can't do anything about the Chromebooks. They're required for everyday work. So we have to mitigate other things to accommodate the growing Chromebooks.
Well, that's an interesting approach because, there's no set way to limit that. So you have to think out of the box, basically, and find new ways to do it.
And that often involves like throttling Instagram, for example. our
That's a popular decision, I'm sure.
Well, yeah. So our district actually has a bring your own device policy. So we actually allow the students to connect their phones and tablets and laptops to the network. And that's under the purview of each principal. Each principal has the ability to change that per school.
Right.
But most of the time they allow everything. So when it comes time, we have to make decisions like that. Whether we throttle apps, Apple App Store traffic. I think we actually ended up blocking Instagram entirely because it was like a third of our traffic. I didn't realize Instagram was that popular, but I guess it is. And we have to just make changes like that to accommodate, business as usual while also catering to the users.
Yep. Well, you're not just support for the school systems. You're also the family support guy, right? The family tech support guy.
For better or worse.
So what's the biggest problem you run into with family tech support?
The biggest problem is probably just having to deal with the malware that a 9-year-old kid can put on a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I would go to him and, try to explain. And this was my nephew. He's 14 now. When he was young, it was a big problem with downloading, Minecraft mods and stuff, of course. Right. And when you go to these sites, they have a lot of ads and stuff that say like download now, and you don't know which one is the download link. And so you inevitably click the wrong thing, and he would get lots of malware on the machine, obviously Windows. And so it was a headache. I felt like it was every 3 weeks I was having to clean his machine, and it was really bad. And I was like, you know what? After a while, I told her, if he does this again, you're on your own, because I've taught him what to click and what not to click. And, and she explained that to him, explained to him like, hey, if you break your computer again, that's it, it's done. He was like, oh, well, maybe I should listen to what he said.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a problem since then, actually. So it worked. But that was the biggest headache as far as my family goes. I've mostly converted like my parents and other people to simpler devices like Chromebooks or tablets or something, just mainly for myself, just to not have to deal with their machines.
So besides family tech support, do you have any other hobbies?
I do fly a drone quite a lot. I have a DJI Mavic Pro, and I like to take drone videos and drone pictures and stuff. That's
Very
pretty
nice.
It's a pretty fun thing I like to do. This summer, probably sometime in July and August, my dad and I are gonna, whenever he's home, because he works offshore, so he's gone 2 weeks and home 2 weeks.
Right.
I was gonna take some time with him to go around different places here in Georgia and fly the drone to take videos and stuff, and spend time with my dad as well. So.
Well, you always see these videos of these guys about to lose their drone in the water, and they're running out into the water to try to save it. Have you ever lost one?
I have not, but my dad has. He's gone through about 3 drones, and so I didn't believe him when he was saying that it was acting the way it was. I was like, really? Because my DJI Mavic Pro, perfect, like absolutely perfect. It flies stable. It does everything I tell it to and nothing else, and I love it. It's also cost me like $1,300. That makes sense, right?
Right.
So my dad, he would buy. He's an old school guy. He doesn't want to spend a lot of money on newer things like that, and I think he'll maybe spend $250 on a drone. Well, in the world of drones, that's generally your bottom tier stuff. And so he had one drone that he was flying, and he said it would just stop listening to the remote and just do whatever it wanted to. And I was like, how far away are you? He's like, maybe, it's across my lawn. Like, it's not even that far.
Right.
And so he was flying it, and the drone would like attack him. Like, it would be flying, and then it just like full speed at him, and he'd have to like dodge it. I saw him drop on the ground once and dodge this drone. And I was like, why are you flying this thing? It's really unsafe.
Did you take lessons?
Yeah, exactly. And he eventually crashed it into a tree. Oh, he didn't crash it. It crashed into a tree, and it broke the frame, so it didn't really, and one of the motors, so it really wasn't worth, for a $200 drone, it's not really worth replacing the parts for it. So
now, I don't know much about drones. I mean, obviously you can pay a ton of money, up from $200 all the way up. I mean, are there major differences between them price ranges, or?
Yeah, mainly it's the kind of quality of the drone itself. So maybe the build materials, the power in the motors, the type of propellers you might get. Just little features like my Mavic can like fold up really easily and be really compact for travel and stuff like that.
Right.
Mostly what you're getting is just quality radios and quality motors, and you're not getting, like his drone would lose its mind and then come after him. Mine won't do that because higher dollar, like it's better software, better everything. And it's not going to do that. I have every faith that my drone will do everything I tell it to, as long as I'm not flying it in the wind.
Right. Well, that's like technology of the future, drones. But let's go back to the very beginning of your days, with the first time you heard or had any interaction with a computer.
I remember this. I was in kindergarten. We were living in Louisiana at the time. I was in kindergarten, and it was an Apple IIe, and we had a few games for it. The actual floppy drive. The 5 1/4-inch discs.
Yep.
And, they taught us, just put the disc in, close it, and press the on button, and just play the game, right? Well, me being me, that's not good enough. So I was thinking, well, what happens if I don't put the disc in, right? And so I don't put the disc in, I turn it on, and it just goes to like a prompt. I was like, okay, what do I do? So naturally I had to start hitting buttons and realize, wow, I'm typing things in. This is great. And then I asked the teacher, what is this? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows. We just put the discs in. And I was like, okay. I was like, is there a book or something? I was maybe like 5 or 6. I've been able to read for years at this point. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of, some of the words were obviously a little confusing to me at the time, but I remember reading through and trying to get an idea of like how to use this, the manual and everything. And they had some basic routines you could do in the basic ROM that was on the Apple II. And so I was able to do like basic math and stuff. And, I was, adding numbers and things like that, very, very basic, like simple stuff, but it was really neat to me. And like, cause I had a Nintendo, right? So I knew about video games. And when I played with the computer, it was just games. It was just educational games instead of Mario, right?
Right.
Like, okay, this is just another video game thing. But then when I realized that like I could do these things and it felt like I had control over the computer. Like I'm telling it what to do. Obviously it's going to do whatever's on the disc, because just like my Nintendo does whatever's on the cartridge.
Right.
But it's not coming from the disc. It's coming from me. And that kind of set me for the rest of my life in every way.
Awesome. So when did you first hear about Linux?
That'll be in 1999. My brother-in-law, Eric, he worked for, I think he had just started the year before, but he worked for Hewlett-Packard as a software developer. And he was using Linux at home. And I went to visit them. He and my sister lived in north of Atlanta. So occasionally I would go visit them. But most of the time we would just go and go have some lunch or something like that. Just, spend time together with my sister.
Right.
But my parents felt, I was old enough, and I think it was, I guess I was like 12 at the time. Like, okay, you can stay over at your sister's house for the weekend. And, me being a computer nerd, gaming nerd and stuff, I was really excited because I knew Eric was kind of a nerd. So it's nice to hang out with him and everything. And he was showing me, first off, the big thing was DSL. Like you didn't have to dial in to get to the internet. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I was blown away. And then so he had let me, he's gonna let me just browse the web. Of course I'm a kid. I was big into like a Star Wars card game at the time, so I was just gonna browse that kind of stuff. It's kid stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I went on there and I was like, I don't know how to do anything on this computer. This looks weird. And I was like, where's Internet Explorer? And he's like, oh, it's the little ship wheel. It's called Netscape. And I was like, okay. I was like, how do I get to it? He's like, oh, you go to this menu. I was like, this doesn't look like Windows at all. And he's like, no, it's a thing called Linux. And I was like, well, what's that? And he didn't want to explain it because he didn't want to be too technical. He's like, it's like Windows, but it's not Windows. I was like, tell me more. Because I want to, I want to see new things, right? I want new horizons,
right?
So he showed me around like the desktop. Now this was 99, okay? This was like KDE 1, I think. Like it was really like way back in the day, and it was awesome. I was blown away. I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, so did you buy this at like CompUSA or something? He's like, no, it's free. I was like, what are you talking about? It can't be free. It's like Windows. Windows isn't free. And then he kind of, pointed me to some websites that talked about, introduction to Linux. And I was reading that. And then they talked about, free software and open source and all that. I was like, it blew my 12-year-old mind, like completely to bits. And I was like, this can't be real. Like I thought it was a scam. I really did. I was like, there's no way you can get this for free. And so I dismissed it after that, and that was the first time, and I didn't come back to it until 2001, and that set me on my path from there.
Well, we can jump right in there. What was your first experience like with Linux? Not that first experience, your first download install.
So we didn't have the magical DSL at the time, so downloading an ISO was pretty out of our reach because of 56K wasn't super fast.
Right.
I mean, you could do it, but my parents were not going to let the phone line stay tied up for like a day or two. So I actually found a book on Red Hat at our local library, And in the back, they had a CD with Red Hat 7.1 on it. And this is Red Hat Linux, not Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This is
right.
Well before Enterprise Linux. And so I brought it home, and I was like, oh, okay, I remember, Eric's computer. This should be fun. So I put it in and tried to boot from like Windows, like I thought it was just like an application you installed, right? Well, of course it didn't work that way. And so I was like, well, maybe I should read the book then, because that's how I roll. I jump right in, and if I need help, I'll look at manual, but I don't read the manual first. So I did that, and I was like, okay, this isn't working. So I read I was reading the manual, and they're explaining like how to do things in BIOS to change your boot order and stuff. And I was like, okay. So I changed it to the CD-ROM, and it booted from the CD-ROM, which I had never done before because I had never had a reason to install Windows or anything. Right. So I was like, okay, it wasn't a thing I had to do. So I was blown away by booting from a CD, and then I just came to the installer. I was like, okay, so it seems simple. It's like a wizard, right? And it started asking me questions about like partitioning and everything, and I was like, I know what a C drive is. So like, I don't know what this like dev HDA. It was HDA at the time because they're IDE drives. So it was like dev HDA whatever. I was like, okay, I'm gonna read some more. So I just kept reading more of the book, and it was a really slow install because every time I'd see something new, I'd have to like read the whole chapter on what I'm doing before doing it. And so I got to the part where you're supposed to configure Xorg for your graphics. And Red Hat made that pretty simple. They had like, a list of graphics adapters, a list of, resolutions. And
wait. Mm-hmm. Linux back then was not simple. Simple for you maybe, but it wasn't simple.
I mean, I was like 14? I don't know. It wasn't that hard.
Okay, go ahead.
So they had a nice list and everything, and I put everything in, and then it asked me like monitor frequencies, and I'm like, huh? What are you talking about, frequencies, right? So I got to learn about vertical and horizontal sync. I got to learn in a giant block of text why it was super dangerous that you have to get this value right, otherwise you will damage your monitor. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, all right, because if you put it too high, the electron beam in the monitor tries to go faster, and it ends up frying your monitor.
Oh, that's not good.
So yeah, because they're CRTs, and at the time EDID and things like that weren't a thing, so you had to tell the computer what your monitor model was, and then in Windows you'd actually have drivers for your monitor, and the monitor would the drivers would tell it, okay, it can do this range, that range, whatever. Well, of course, in true Linux fashion, everything is manual, so I had to put in the actual values, and it said they're usually listed on the sticker on the back of the monitor. So I had to go around the monitor, and I found them, and I put them in correctly, and everything was good there. I got to the part about booting, and at this point I was like 3 hours deep, and I'm like, man, I'm getting kind of tired of this. This is way more work than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be like installing a game in Windows. So the booting part was extremely confusing because Grub was not a thing. Automatic detection in Grub was not a thing. Right. OS Prober was not a thing. It was all Lilo, and you had to really know your stuff to get Lilo to do anything you wanted it to. So they said if you're running Windows, do this and that. And I tried it. It installed the bootloader, and I rebooted. I was like, oh, awesome, right? No. There was no more Windows. You couldn't get back into Windows.
Oh, man.
You would boot into Linux all day long, but it wouldn't boot into Windows. Now, this was not my computer. This was our family computer.
Uh-oh. Adam broke it.
Yeah. I got yelled at quite a bit, and I was grounded from the computer for 2 weeks. So that was the first time. But 2 weeks later, I tried it again. I make sure I read everything properly. I do everything properly. I reboot, no Windows. So I get another 2 weeks of grounding.
Uh-oh.
We're doing it again.
And it's all Linux fault.
Yeah. And then, so the third time, The third time there were like some key parts in there that I was missing, because the computer I was doing it on had XP on it, and XP computers at the time came with a recovery partition, not recovery CDs. So
Right.
basically what I was doing is pointing it to booting the recovery partition, not the actual Windows install, because I was following what the book said verbatim, not what was actually present on my system.
Yeah.
Once I realized that, oh wait, HDA2 is Windows, then I figured it out. So I got the third time I got it working, no problem. We had a 40 gig hard drive. I put 10 gig of Red Hat 7.1 and 30 gig of Windows. We were off to the races.
Well, we already established what intrigues you about Linux. We've already established that you have no fear of jumping in and jumping in again and again and again.
That's how you learn, right?
Right? So looking back at that first experience, you've already mentioned some of it, but give me some pros and cons to that first experience.
So the pros was I was really excited to get it all working. Like it was a really great feeling. It's the phrase like you can't go home, like no matter what you do in life, like that you'll never re-experience something the first time, right?
Right.
And so it was my first time like with installing Linux, and then when I successfully booted in, even though I'd already kind of messed up Windows, when I booted in and saw like the new interface and like everything, it was so new. It's like, traveling to a distant land and seeing like things you've never seen before. It
feels awesome.
Pro. Yeah, that was the big pro. And the idea that it was free, like free in the money. And then later, when I started to care, free as in freedom, like it was amazing to me. But the cons were, it was difficult. As a 14-year-old kid, like I was pretty technically savvy, but this was all new to me. Like everything, like the terminology was new, and I glossed over a lot of little details that you needed back then, and it was a lot to learn, and the learning curve is certainly there. Now, you can understand that these days I feel less, sympathetic to people who say that it's too hard, because it's way simple these days. But back then it was legitimately it was a journey. But
yep.
The other cons were none of my games worked in Linux. This was Steam wasn't even a thought at the time.
Right.
And like the games you had are like Frozen Bubble. I think I later got a GeForce card and managed to get Tux Racer working. But now, don't even get me started on, do you think proprietary drivers are bad now?
Yeah.
Whew, they were way bad then. But, yeah.
I think we actually have it pretty nice right at this moment of going down the list from drivers to gaming to program software. I think, we have strides to make yet, but I think we're at a good spot.
Yeah. And, when it comes to like multiple distros to choose from and everything, those distros existed back then. But for most people, they didn't have the internet connection to get them, or they didn't have a CD burner to write them, or any of those. So you often had to, rely on box copies. And, later on in my high school career, I ended up with a box copy of SUSE. I think it was, I don't remember the version exactly. I think it was like SUSE 9 or something. But it was, I bought a box copy from a CompUSA of SUSE, and that was $70, but still cheaper than a full, because you get an upgrade of Windows for $100, but if you wanted the full install, it was like 200 plus.
Yeah.
But so to get like a full install OS for $70, I'll take it.
Yep. So what's the time frame then? Like you tried Linux in the XP era. Mm-hmm. What's the time frame then from you switching from Windows to Linux, or was there MacOS?
MacOS,
that MacOS, that's an inside joke, by the way. Was there macOS in between there?
There was sprinklings of macOS among the time. For up until about 2001 when I started, and even then I didn't keep it around. I didn't keep Linux around because it's a family computer, and Right. They were very on me about like doing that. So it wasn't until I got my own computer later in high school that I could, I had my own computers before, but they were like 286s and stuff. I just ran DOS on. Like they weren't, they were just for me to learn stuff. They weren't necessarily just for, actual use.
I talk to a lot of different people, and they always have a memory about an older computer like that. Do you have a favorite computer in those days?
Yeah, it was the first computer that was mine. I didn't have to share it with my siblings or anything. It was a Compact Desk Pro 286. It had 640K of conventional RAM, and I think it had 384K of extended memory. Which was not a K. Yeah, I didn't even have a megabyte of memory basically. And that actually prevented me from running Windows on the box, Windows 3. Because I still have my box copy of Windows 3.1, by the way. But, it prevented me from running that. And so I was forced to learn DOS. I was forced to learn how to actually, build programs and do things myself, which was okay because that was the type of kid I was. But I loved that computer. And I learned a few interesting commands on there. One was double space, which is a compression program that MS-DOS, I think 6.22 came with.
Right.
And the idea was to, compress data on the fly to give you more hard drive space. Well, my hard drive was a 20 meg hard drive. And with using this, I was like, oh man, I got like 80 megs, man. This is great. I got plenty of space. Well, it was horribly unstable, and I lost everything several times. And I got to be very good at installing MS-DOS. And I learned BASIC. We were using QBasic. That came with the machine. So I learned how to write simple things in QBasic. I learned obviously like scripting with like batch files and things like that in there as well. And then coming over to Linux, I was having done all that, I was not scared of the terminal in the slightest. I was like, that's what I was used to. That's actually what I grew up on, learning on that Apple II. And then later our family got a 386 with DOS, and like, so terminal was just normal to me. But that 286 was where I learned a lot of things, and I actually had the freedom to experiment and kind of, stretch myself and learn what I could. And the other command I learned was format. That's yeah. It's really bad when your operating system really allows you to format the running operating system. Yeah,
that's not good.
Yeah, well, my dad had told me that somebody at work had told him that format was a bad command, and he just told me never to do it on the family computer.
He shouldn't have told you that, probably, huh?
That was the wrong thing, because like I never would have even known about the command. I never would have found it. And then he told me don't do it. So when I got my machine, about a month in, I'm like, he told me not to do it. This is mine. I'm gonna do it. I learned why not to do it. I didn't, and at the time I didn't know what it was for. I was like, why is there a command that just deletes everything? This is stupid.
Yep.
It's just like, I thought it was just like a self-destruct.
It kind of is.
Yeah,
I guess
it can be. Yeah.
All right. Do you consider yourself a distro hopper?
I would consider myself a distro nomad.
Okay.
So,
explain.
I wouldn't say that I hop all the time. I'm not, one of the chronic hoppers that hop every week or hop every few days.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not pointing fingers, but
don't judge me.
Not. It's all love over here on this side. So I would consider myself somebody who enjoys moving from one distro to another after spending a good time there. I'll come in, irrigate the fields, do a little bit of work, and then when I've stripped the soil of its nutrients, I'll move to another one. It's simple. So I'll spend a month or two or even more with a distro, and then just move on to something else because I just want change, or maybe some new version of something came out, or the distro is doing something fundamentally different now, and that intrigues me. Just as you've probably heard so far, I like to try new things and tinker with new things. So when they say, hey, there's a new version of GNOME or a new version of KDE or something that's got these bells and whistles, I want to try out those bells and whistles.
Right. Well, to be honest with you, all joking aside, that's right at the point where I am right now. Like, I enjoy testing out distros on a test machine, but on my main machine, I want stability, but yet I do want to try out other things. So I end up usually switching from, say, a KDE desktop, try it for a few months. I had my Arch Plasma install for a few months. And then, I get into that itchiness where I want to try out GNOME again, and I'm on Pop OS, and I am been on it for a couple months now. So I'm sure the next itch will be coming along soon. But
yeah, I think that's very inherent to a lot of Linux users that I've met and that I've talked to. Is not so much that they have this chronic problem of wearing out their SSDs or anything, but they want to try new things, because that's part of the reason a lot of people come to Linux in the first place. They want something that's different. They want something that's new. They want something that feels differentiated. That's why there are a billion distros. Everyone wants their way of doing things, and that's fine. That's probably why people, I feel like the people who distro hop multiple times a week, they might have like some OCD or some actual problem there. But
there's a hotline for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. The crisis line, guys. So the people who switch every month or every couple months, I feel like it's not that they're thinking like grass is greener syndrome or anything. I think they're just simply like, okay, I want to try out this new thing because that's part of why I'm using Linux to begin with. And then there's a good number of people who they get Debian stable and they stay on it until it's no longer supported. And those people, I envy those people because I wish I could be that content in life, but it's not the case.
So you've tried pretty much all of the distros and desktop environments out there.
Yeah.
But you still haven't found the one you want to land on? Or do you ever think there will be a point where you will get to that point where you say, I want to stick with this for a long time?
Yes. Yeah. So as nobody is surprised to hear if they have heard me anytime, I think GNOME is amazing in terms of the design and everything and the way it works, the interoperability of it. I like the GNOME environment. There are a few things that bother me about the GNOME environment. One is the lack of fractional scaling on my 4K monitor. The Ubuntu guys have solved that on 1904, but the patch has not been upstreamed because it's still experimental. So once that becomes a non-issue, then we'll take that. The other thing is kind of the Mutter Compositor performance issues. Like games don't always get unredirected, so you don't necessarily get the best performance if they're not bypassing the compositor. So you might have some stuttering and things going on there. On proprietary NVIDIA cards, GNOME tends to kind of struggle. If you're using the open source Intel and AMD cards, it doesn't struggle as much, but you're also using those cards.
Right.
So you have your own set of problems.
And you wouldn't be using those cards.
Correct.
If you bought a, like I have a 2080, I'm surely not going to use the Nouveau drivers.
Yeah, I have a 1080 Ti, same thing. Yeah, not happening. So there are some performance issues that GNOME has, but as far as everything else, like if I can look past those, or just use Ubuntu for the scaling problem, GNOME is like, it fits like a glove to me. Like it just feels good. Like I love the way it works. I love the way it looks. It's a good workflow for me. Like the keyboard shortcuts are great too. As far as like the distro that GNOME would run on, I'm partial to Fedora. Maybe my original Red Hat goodness that I started with, but I've always been partial to Fedora. I think if I had to clock all the hours that I've spent on Linux distros, Fedora would certainly be the top. I've run Fedora since it was Fedora Core back in, before, I think the first one I started was Fedora Core 2. That's simply because I didn't realize that Fedora had started a thing because I was still using Red Hat. I was using Red Hat 9 at the time, and I didn't realize Fedora was a thing until Fedora Core 2. I know I used 2, 3. I think I skipped to 5 and 6. I know I used like 8, 10, and from 12 all the way to 30. I've used it at least once.
So now you mentioned that you love GNOME, but you are a guy that will use GNOME vanilla.
Yeah. I don't actually.
I didn't know that person existed, dude. I mean,
we do. There are dozens of us. Yeah, there. I don't need a lot of extensions at all. It's not that I don't enjoy extensions, and trust me, like I could run extensions, no problem. But the main part is I don't have to run extensions. I can get everything done without needing extensions. And sure, there are certain things in like a system tray that you would want, like, I don't know, unread messages, notifications, or being able to quit Electron apps properly.
Right.
That. But honestly, if I need to quit a desktop, if I need to quit Discord or quit Slack or something that's Electron, odds are it's because it's malfunctioning and the quit in the system tray is not going to work anyway. So that's a kill 9 right there.
Right.
But I don't really see the need for the system tray for my workflow. I know some people really rely on it, and I know, in the case of like Wine games, sometimes the BattleNet launcher or Uplay or something will be in the system tray, and you need to close it properly, otherwise Wine won't stop running. And I see the need for it, but for me, I don't necessarily bemoan that. Right. Desktop icons is the same way. The starred system that GNOME has had, sort of the favoriting system. I think that's perfectly fine replacement for desktop icons. I use it for those that I need to. I think Dolphin has the superior tagging system in KDE, which is very similar to the way macOS does things, where you can add specific tags to specific files and then search them by tag or filter them by tag. I would like to see the GNOME guys bring that in terms of the starred system, but it's GNOME, so I'm not holding my breath.
So I'm like the exact opposite. I want the system tray, so I have to add an extension to get the system tray. And for example, like Telegram, you can't see any notifications, or you can't see the actual icon. I'm used to seeing, I guess it's just what I'm used to. You're used to seeing the system tray there, so you expect to see Telegram open. You expect to see your applications running. So that's
I can completely understand that, and I get how people grow used to that. From when Windows implemented that, Windows 95, and that's kind of the traditional system tray that people
they had brainwashed us, dude.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Brainwashing is fine. That's what I've been programmed to say. So.
Speaking of Windows and Mac, do you use Windows and Mac anymore, or you
use
Linux?
Both, yeah. I use all three. I am not a zealot in any particular way. I prefer Linux above all. I prefer Linux mainly for the community of people around it. The software, is of varying quality. That's the most polite way I can say it. And there are a lot of things that I can get done on my iMac that I can't get done on Linux. Or if I can get it done on Linux, it will take an inordinate amount of effort to do so. When another program could possibly provide that easier. Same thing goes with Windows, right? Like, I would prefer to play games in Linux if I can, but not always the case. And sometimes, even though their game will run in Linux, maybe the performance is just so bad that it's unplayable. And even on, I have a beefy machine, an 8700K, 32 gig, and a 1080 Ti, but there are still games that struggle on Linux.
Yes.
And, sometimes you got to use Windows for those. Sometimes, if you have to do something for work, because I work from home at least one day a week, sometimes, whenever I can. And I need applications that are going to work for work sometimes. Most of my work is done in Linux, so I don't need it super often, but sometimes I do. And,
but it's there enough to have them machines and them operating systems around.
So it's actually going back to my whole curiosity and just enjoying computing in general. That's ultimately what drives it. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into just using Linux or just using Windows or just using Mac. And the same thing applies to mobile devices. I have an iPhone and I have a Pixel too. I mean, I have both, and I'm lucky enough that I can afford all of these things. But at the same time, I understand, like, other people don't, and they have to kind of draw their line in the sand, or they have some ethical or philosophical reasons they draw a line in the sand. But for me, I don't see any need for that. There's so much available in computing that it'd be silly to limit myself.
Right. Well, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Use what's best and right for that situation and what you want to use. It shouldn't be that I can't use this or this operating system because it's that operating system. Use what's best.
Correct.
Whatever works. That's to me is just plain common sense. But all right, so you talked about GNOME and that fits your workflow. What exactly is your workflow and what applications do you use on a daily basis?
So the main applications that I need, I can either live in Firefox or Chromium, or Chrome or whatever, but I need a web browser, obviously. And then aside from that, I have Telegram, Discord, Spotify, and Slack. Those are the 4 apps that always get installed. Like no matter what, they're always installed. Another thing is my VPN software for work, which I use OpenConnect through the terminal to connect to my work VPN. So that's essential because at least one day a week I need to get work done, or at least pretend to. And so yeah, I use those 5 definitely. Aside from that, gaming, I like Steam and Lutris both. Lutris is amazing. Like
Lutris is awesome.
I cannot, if I could meet that man, I would hug him. Like it's so good. So those are for my gaming, and I've been trying to find a good home for a Markdown editor. Before I would always just write Markdown in like Visual Studio Code or something like that,
right?
Or Vim, whichever one, and just kind of roll with that. But I'm trying to find a good Markdown editor. So anybody in the comments want to recommend some Markdown editors, let me know.
There you go. So speaking of software, is there any software that's not currently available in Linux that you'd like to see?
Probably the Epic Game Store running properly, because I'm really looking forward to that Borderlands 3. And I know people are gonna flame, Epic. That's like, look, guys, I want to play the game. It doesn't matter to me what they do. I just want to play the game.
Yep. At the end of the day, you just want to play the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if it comes to Linux, I'll play it there. But if it doesn't, that's how the dice got rolled. Outside of that, I would really like the Microsoft Office stuff to come to Linux. I really feel like that's a big one for a lot of people.
Do you feel that the web applications of those are good enough, or do you want the actual programs?
So the actual programs do a whole lot more than the web-based versions do, especially when it comes to Excel. Sometimes I have to do some simple, not something super complex, but I do have to do some data manipulation, like kind of make some visualizations for the management and things like that. And using pivot tables and other things that are built into Excel is LibreOffice Calc is nice, but it's no Excel. And sometimes I just need and again, it's not necessarily a matter of like you can't do it in Linux, but I only have so many hours a day at work. I need to get these things done. Right. So I just fire up the Linux, the Windows VM, and I open up Excel and I work on what I need to do. And it would be nice if I didn't have to fire up that Windows VM.
Yep. Again, we go back to using the right tool for the job. And sometimes, as unfortunate as they may be right now, sometimes it's better to use Excel than it is to use LibreOffice. So
yeah, but Word is terrible. So
yeah. All right. So you use your Linux for work. You use it for home. Is there a measurement of you use it more for gaming than you do work, or do you use your computer for more leisure time, or do you use it for more work?
I probably spend more time on my computer at work than I do at home. Mainly because I have so when I say computer, I mean like my desktop, right? So like when I come home, I do sit at my desktop for quite a few hours, but I also have an iPad Pro that I like to sit down and browse the web or watch videos on. Sometimes I'm in my living room just browsing Netflix or watching YouTube and on the TV, or maybe I'm not even at home at all. And but while I'm at work, from 7 to around 4, like 3 to 4, I'm I'm just on Linux all day long.
Right.
So, you know,
So people have many reasons why they use Linux. Obviously, you like to tinker with things. You like to check them out. But is that the main reason you love Linux? Is it the customization, the flexibility, the open source software?
it's probably mostly these days the community, the people around it. You know, I've tried to get into, you know, Windows user groups and Mac user groups. The Mac user groups are okay, but unsurprisingly to me, but there's a lot of older, like really old people in the Mac user groups, and the ones that I've experienced, they kind of look down on newer, younger people. And I'm not super young. I'm 32, you know, but
Right.
like they kind of look
same
down,
age
like,
as me.
so yeah. So, but they kind of look down on the younger people. You know, they think all we're interested are in iPads and iPhones, but it's like, no, I'm more interested in the Mac than I am the iPad. You know, like I want a computer, and they don't necessarily, you know, see it that way. But the Windows people are just, I've never seen a group more self-loathing than Windows users. It's kind of funny. Like they're really confident, from my experience, they're very confident in their platform, but they are the first to like bemoan its issues. And I know there's nothing wrong with criticizing what you love.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome of sorts. Like they know it's terrible. They know they hate the experience. They know they hate the updates. They know it's slow on their machine. But because it has this one piece of software that they want, or this one game, they just put up with all of the abuse.
Yep.
And just to maintain that. And it's sad. I use Windows, but not like, I don't use Windows because I love Windows. I use Windows because it does what I need it to, and it's not too bad, right? At least in my book. If you have the right machine, it's not too bad.
Right.
But it's definitely not my preference. And you know, the Linux community just seems, it's an interesting dichotomy. There are the trolls and everything, but there's a lot of people who really enjoy, you know, talking to one another about Linux, and you know, you begin to learn these people as people, you know, not so much just as Linux users. You know, you get to know them better, and everyone just seems a little more open in general than on the other side. And I enjoy that. I enjoy having conversation about things that I'm passionate about, and it's really helpful to have people who are also passionate about it.
Right.
You know, I can learn from these people, and there are things that they can learn from me. And you know, a lot of this information, yeah, it's available online. You can find, you know, blogs that might post it, or you know, some tutorials or something. Sure, it's all there, but maybe there's something that this blogger has never experienced, and there might be some little thing that another user can specifically say, oh, I remember when that happened to me, I did this. Or maybe you should look at this because that should be here, this place, or anything like that, that the tutorial may not even dabble on. And you can have either success or failure based on these little things. And that's something that you can really get from the community that you don't get in Windows. The Windows community, they just talk mostly about just their PC specs. That's all I really hear about. Like,
yeah,
I
bragging
got
rights.
this new graphics card. I got this new hard disk or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's great. So, like, are you more of a general PC enthusiast then, not so much Windows enthusiast?
Well, I think that was the great thing about Self, was that you got to meet everybody personally, and even though you could easily have conversations about Linux, you were having conversations just with a person. You know, correct, about anything, about having coffee or and then when you're able to have have conversations about normal stuff, you can still flip it over into Linux, and they don't look at you like you're crazy.
Exactly, it makes a big difference. And you know, Atlanta has no shortage of Linux professionals and Linux users, but there's not too many of them that get together physically. You know, they do have the Atlanta Linux enthusiasts, and I've been to a couple of their meetings. They're okay guys. I don't think they're anything terrible, but I wasn't blown away by them either. And but like, you know, actually meeting people who are passionate, you know, is a big difference. You know, you can find a Linux admin out there who would be willing to talk to you about Linux at work, but he uses Windows at home, and he's not passionate about Linux. He's just, this is what I do for work.
Right.
And there are those people. I have those people at work, on my team who, enjoy using Linux. They like Linux, but they're not Linux enthusiasts. They're just like, it does a good job for what it does, and I'm leaving it at that. So it's nice to find a community of people who enjoy talking about these things, who are passionate about it, who aren't afraid to, criticize certain parts and reinforce other parts and throw in hypotheticals of like, how can we improve? How can we do this? Where can we lead this? And that kind of discourse is really, really important. And that's a big part of why I use Linux.
So you have technical backgrounds, your support for your job. Between your job and your home time in Linux, what is the one problem that you found most satisfying when you fixed it?
Between both?
Between either one. Just pick a memory or a problem that you had to go through that you enjoyed fixing that gave you the most satisfaction.
So there are two of them that come to mind at work. One is we were moving from a Citrix Zen server hypervisor environment to a KVM-based environment based on Red Hat Enterprise virtualization. And moving from Zen to KVM is a big pain in getting everything to work correctly once you migrate it. Now, these are production machines, so if anything goes wrong, that's a big problem.
Yep.
And at the same time, we're moving from local storage on each of the servers, it's a very small environment, to using a shared storage application using a thing called Gluster. It was not really the best choice at the time, looking back, but I was inexperienced in what I was doing, and I was kind of having to learn as I go. So getting Zen to getting my Zen VMs to go into the KVM cluster was really satisfying, because the whole thing took me about a week, because not only was I having to do it, I was having to do it for production machines and having never done it before, having never touched any of this. So right. It was a week of a lot of reading documentation, a lot of testing, everything I could. And because our team is so small, and it's K-12 education, we don't have a whole lot of money to go around. I have to kind of test things the best way I can. I don't have a test environment. I don't have several servers that I can test these things on. So I had actually at home, to test the Gluster storage concept, I had set up 2 machines, a laptop and my desktop, and set up multiple VMs and set up my own cluster and tested it at night. Now, this was after work, mind you. I'm a contractor. I wasn't getting paid for this, but this is my name on the line, so I made sure I knew what I was doing. So I made a whole cluster in my house and tested everything I could, and I was up until 2 a.m. doing all this, and then I woke up at 5:30 the next couple hours later and went to work, and it was a whole week of that. And when I finally got my VMs to boot correctly, and they were stored on the shared storage, and they could migrate, and the HA was working, and all this stuff was working, I breathed the biggest sigh of relief I had ever breathed in my life. It was a lot of work. It was worth it though.
But that's such an awesome feeling when you accomplish something like that, dude.
Yeah, and it turned out to be an absolute maintenance nightmare because the software was bad, but I got it to work. Work, and that was a big one. And then not long after that, my colleague, using Ansible, and we now have a better process for this, inadvertently deleted system D off of all of our machines.
Oops.
So I got to do what I did in that 1 week. I got to do it in 1 day. So whoa. The difference was I already knew what I was doing. So I knew how to do it. I knew how it worked. So I was at work from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. And then I worked on it remotely until about 1 a.m. and got everything working as best it could. And I migrated my VMs back over from backups, and they all worked. And I was like, awesome. So that was pretty difficult. That was difficult times.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, let's go back to the community a little bit. You've been in Linux for a while. So I'm sure you've experienced some toxic people and some friendly people. But what can we do as a community to make that experience better?
So the way I see it is Linux itself and the community is something born of the internet. Linux was started in, the early days of, right before like the World Wide Web was a thing, and all the collaboration and stuff is done over the internet. And so the community is kind of inherent to internet behaviors. So there are people who are, naturally just trolls on the internet. There are naturally people who just want to, stir the pot on the internet. There are people who want to see the greatest in people on the internet. There are people who fall for the other people's, preying on them. And it's all part of the human nature on the internet.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Linux community, is being of the internet, is not immune to any of these. And I think as a community, we could probably look to each other in more of a human way. And it doesn't help when the people who are in charge of a lot of these projects are, let's just say, less than savory to the people in their project at times.
That can happen.
And so when you have those people who interact in such a negative way, it kind of sets the stage for the community underneath them. It does trickle down to the people beneath you. You can find that in everyday life. If you have a friend who is just inherently negative and they're around all the time, you become a negative person just by being around them. And that kind of negativity shouldn't really be tolerated in the Linux community. Now, there are people who say, we have free speech, we should be able to say whatever we want. Well, sure, but you need to recognize that what you say has consequences, and what these people say and do and the way they treat each other has a consequence in the way that the community develops. If you start a child and you spoil a child when they're young, it's near impossible by the time they're a teenager to deal with them in any other way. And that's kind of what happened in the Linux community for a long time. Is, in the early days, a lot of people it was a very, hacker ethic. It was very, everyone had to prove their mettle, so to speak. And, when I was early in Linux, I had to deal with that. Thankfully, I'm male. Thankfully, I could, I only had to interact on, message boards. Like, I didn't have to interact on YouTube or anything where anyone could see me or any of that. So I had a certain level, and this was before social media, so I had a certain level of anonymity about me. Being a rather eloquent young man, I was not called out for being a kid, so I had a decent time getting help when I needed it. But there were people who didn't, and people who were younger, you could see in there the way they type, they would come out as younger and people would dismiss them. And that was the beginning, and I wasn't even around for the very beginning, like when Debian was like 93, Slackware was like 93, like, I can imagine how much it was then. But after a while, these things start to grate on the community as a whole, and you start to see it kind of get out of control. And in recent years, there have been efforts to put in place for codes of conduct in certain projects and try to, put in new voices and not so much the old way of looking at things, and try to change things. And that's exactly what we need. We need people who are willing to, shake up the norms that are in the Linux community, because those norms are not very productive.
I would totally agree that is so important to, we talk about what you can do in the Linux community, but I think it's so important, number one, to not give in to those, even though you may be around a negative person, but to not let yourself give into that negativity and continue to be that positive person that you can be. And two, when these posts are available to be voted on, you should be vocalizing your effort to put somebody in there that is going to represent the community, and not just be I don't know what else you would call it, a dictator or whatever you want. But
correct. And unfortunately, that is one of the rhetoric that people use, the benevolent dictator for life. Well, benevolence doesn't imply being polite, but
Right.
there's a lack of that, and there's also a lack of just diversity in general. And I know people typically look at that and they scoff. They think of the social justice folks, and they look, they get kind of turn their nose up at the idea. But there are people in other walks of life, minorities and women and trans people and such, that gay and lesbian people, they have certain experiences that they have in their life, and that it would be silly not to take their experiences into heart in terms of what they can bring to the community. There are plenty of female coders out there who have brilliant minds and they have great ideas, and by excluding them because they're female, or because you for whatever reason you think they're not worthy or whatever, you're depriving your project of a clever mind who could have brought something great to the table. And that's also a big problem.
Yep. All right. So give me one thing you love about Linux and one thing you dislike that you would want to change.
One thing I love about Linux is that I can edit anything I want on there with reckless abandon. Because I've had so many times where I've had to deal with applications on Windows or even Mac OS or any of these, and if there's a problem, I just have to submit a bug report, and that's it. I can't do anything about it. I just hope it gets fixed. And there are applications that I have to deal with at work that do the same thing, and there's nothing I can do. But the applications we use on our team are all open source, and the operating system is all open source. And so if Linux has a problem on one of my servers, I don't have to call Microsoft to have them submit a patch for me, and it'll cost the organization tens of thousands of dollars. I just go in there and change it. I just go in there and do what I need to. If there's something that's not working on my computer or not quite right, I just find the config file, find out exactly what I got to change, and change it. I love that. That flexibility is invaluable. And as far as what I don't like,
yeah, give me one thing.
It's got to be the graphics stack. And I don't think Wayland is the solution either. Xorg has done amazing things based on what it is, and I think the people work hard. And none of this is to demean any of the work that people do on these projects.
Right.
I simply think that for a user, these projects are not quite fitting what we need to. There are problems with performance and other things on X, and obviously security is one of them. But then you look at Wayland, and I feel like they went overboard with the security thing to the point where you can't even, you have to plug into a Unix socket to do a screencast. Like that seems just bonkers to me. And like these kind of decisions, obviously they're for security's sake, but they went too far with that. And this need to write everything around open source drivers is also silly, because people have to recognize NVIDIA is a huge part of the market, and people want the performance out of their computers. They want the proprietary driver, and you need to make your stuff work with it. If NVIDIA says, "Hey, we're doing EGL streams," we'll do EGL streams. Like that needs to happen. And the graphics,
well, it's always the game back and forth to blame the other one for why we're not able to do that. Like, it's a shame. It's a shame that it has to be that way.
Yeah, but the graphics stack is probably the one part. I don't think Pulse Audio is that bad, so that would have been my second one.
Sometimes.
But I don't think it's bad. Yeah, it's pretty flexible in what you're able to do with it, and
it's
like
gotten
that.
way better.
But the graphics stack just needs. I don't know if Mir would have been our savior and just got closed off, but we need something.
So thinking of all the reasons that you chose to use Linux, or maybe the one reason you chose to use Linux, does that still apply today? Yes.
Yeah. I mainly use Linux because it was new and interesting and different and exciting. And even though I feel like sometimes I've seen it all, I've been through GNOME 1, 2, 3, KDE at least 3, 4, and 5. I've been through XFCE, 2 versions because they release every 10 years. And just, I've been through a lot of different environments, a lot of different applications, different distros, but it's always moving. It's always something new, and it's always exciting because it's not just, it's got this new feature where I can press this button and make confetti pop out. Like it's got this new feature that makes confetti pop out, and look at the way it's built. Look at how awesome it is. Like it's the most efficient confetti you've ever seen. And that's awesome. Like it uses, less memory per confetti flake. It's great. And that's exactly what I love about it. It's always exciting and new.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people?
Just embrace the community is the biggest thing. And if you're going to be a part of the community, bring positivity with you, because, there are times where we desperately need it. And there are times when it's in an abundance, but please, if you join the Linux community, bring positivity and just enjoy using your machine. And don't feel like you have to be a zealot or some kind of religious figure. You don't have to absolutely embrace everything about free software and open source. You can just come in, use the software as you need to, and do what you need to do. If you dual boot, if you use it in a VM, if you use it in the Windows subsystem for Linux, you're still using Linux, and that's good on my book.
All right, so how can people get a hold of you if they want to give you comments? Or, obviously they can comment to the video, but is there other ways they can get a hold of you?
So I'm pretty active in the BDLL Telegram community. I'm also in a few others, but I'm not nearly as active. But anybody can message me on Telegram. I'm always up for that. I occasionally check Mastodon, not too often. Twitter, I don't post anything. I very rarely post anything, but I do read a lot of Twitter, probably more than I should. So if anybody tweets at me, I will probably respond. And I do have a website that I'm sure there'll be a link to in the description.
Yep.
And you're more than welcome to read my rantings on there. There's some Apple stuff on there. There's some Linux stuff on there. I have a couple articles that I planned for this weekend for some enterprise stuff. So there's some stuff on there you might like. But generally speaking, Telegram is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
All right, that wraps up our discussion. Thank you, Adam, for joining us here. We talk about these kind of things like every day on Telegram. But Thank you so much for joining us here.
Yeah, don't be offended if I troll you a little on Telegram too. So.
All right. Thank you all for joining this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux. All right. This is like a really important question. Mm-hmm. And you are a cat owner.
I am, yeah.
And he's an awesome cat.
Mickey. Yeah.
Mickey. So you have inside knowledge on this next question.
Mm-hmm.
So is your toilet paper over or under?
Neither. So we take the bare roll and we sit it, with the holder bar there.
Yeah.
Sit it on top. So it's just like a roll there. It's not on the floor, so you're not getting crap, like gunked up on your roll. But you sit it on there, and then when you need to use it, you just wrap it around your hand to form like a nice pad there, and you use it that way. Because I'm not busting through the toilet paper when I use it, man. It's not happening. So this method has been tried and true for decades now, and I will continue to do that.
I'll trust you on that one.